Hello and welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top local, national, and world stories from a moral, ethical, and religious perspective. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children. I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Reverend Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition. New member Richard Uhler, retired U.S. Army chaplain. Dr. John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist Church. Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. We begin this week with the rising tensions in the Middle East after Iran fired 200 ballistic missiles targeting Israel.
This morning, after that massive Iranian missile assault targeting Israel's major cities Tuesday, Israel says it's preparing a counterstrike. These videos circulating on social media showing missiles pouring down on an Israeli military base. In a span of about 30 minutes, Iran firing about 200 ballistic missiles, one of the largest such attacks in history. Israelis scrambling for shelter. Israel's air defense systems intercepting most of those missiles, some shot down by the U.S. military. But multiple missiles penetrating that missile defense shield, one hitting this elementary school in southern Israel. Video showing another exploding north of Tel Aviv. No! And this nearby surveillance video capturing the moment one landed near Israel's intelligence headquarters. We saw this massive crater in the area.
The blast radius here is about 200 meters. You can see what it did to that car. The missile essentially disintegrating on impact here, and the crater it left behind is about 30 feet deep.
A piece of one missile the size of a bus killing a Palestinian in the West Bank. Moments before the sirens, a separate deadly attack outside a Tel Aviv rail station, terrorists killing at least 7. Meanwhile, Iranian officials say their massive air attack is in response to Israel killing Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, as well as the assassination of a Hamas political leader in Tehran in July.
So this week is Rosh Hashanah. We would normally have a rabbi here joining us to contribute to this conversation. Without that this week, I felt it important to have that community represented. So we're going to take a second here and listen to Rabbi Litvin, who is the chairman of the Kentucky Jewish Council. He was on WHS Radio with Terry Miners on Tuesday. So Rebecca, let's go ahead and play that.
So number one, it's important to note that October 7th, a brutal Hamas attack where hundreds of women were raped, where children were murdered, where families were burnt alive, could not have happened without Iran's backing, without the weapons they sent, and without the funds they received, which they in turn received from the Western world, mainly from America. So October 7th, the glove was Hamas, but the attack was planned and thought of in Tehran, and it's been planned for years. Similarly, for the last 11 months, Hezbollah, located in Lebanon, have made the entire north of Israel unlivable. The communities that I went to college in Sfas, Israel, when I went back to visit a couple months ago, there were frequent rocket attacks. And again, every one of those rockets is paid for by Iran. So Iran has been bombing Israel without stop for the last 11 months. They've been just doing so through proxies. This is a long-awaited response to tens of thousands of Israelis, hundreds of thousands of Israelis not being able to live in their homes. I'm a rabbi. It says in Psalms, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. 181 ballistic missiles were launched, and 0 Israelis are dead. 0. If that's not miraculous, I don't know what the word for that is. However, the idea that Iran can keep this up, they themselves have said if Israel doesn't react, we're not going to do anything. They're looking for an out here. So here's the thing. We embarrass them in their own capital, the Western world, when they took out Haniya, who was an enemy of the Western world. Over the last month, Hezbollah has been decimated, including killing the 2 people who were physically responsible for the Marine bombing in 1983, as well as Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, who suffocated on toxic fumes underneath 80,000 pounds of explosives. And they had to make some sort of reaction to keep any kind of legitimacy in the region. But they already knew in April, when they fired 300 missiles and didn't succeed in killing a single Israeli, that they don't actually have the ability to threaten Israel. The only ability they have is to make life difficult for Israeli citizens. For too long, Israel has relied on the Iron Dome, and the Western world has pushed Israel to rely on the Iron Dome. And because they didn't succeed in killing anyone, that Israel should have to take a back seat. Now, we have a crime in America called attempted murder. Just because you don't succeed in killing someone, we don't go, oh, well, no harm, no foul, and move on with our day. And for too long, that's what the Western world has asked Israel to do. When they call this an escalation after 10 months, 11 months of Hezbollah bombs hitting north of Israel, this is not an escalation. This is a response, and a rather proportionate one. It's one that took out a remarkably low civilian to combatant ratio. It's important to recognize that all the enemies that America is facing off with on a global scale are backing Iran. And it's important for those who value freedom, for those who value rights for minorities, rights for religious minorities, rights for anyone, rights for women, etc., to back Israel at this time. I think actually what America is doing is great. Sit on the sidelines, let Israel handle this, stand up proudly and say we have Israel's back. We stand on the side of freedom. We stand on the side of democracy. We stand against the mullahs of Iran who consider Israel the small Satan. They consider America the great Satan. There's a misconception among some that the reason that the radical Islamists hate America is because of Israel. More accurately, the reason they hate Israel is because of America. Radical Islam's war against America goes back to Thomas Jefferson. It's why our Marines sing from the hills of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Because when Jefferson was president, we went to war against Islamists who said we have the right to take American hostages because they are infidels against our faith.
So we certainly appreciate WHS Radio and Terry Miner's and Rabbi Litvin's comments, and I turn it over to our panel now for local discussion today.
Certainly, it's a sad situation anytime war breaks out, but it's broken out. This is, in my view, a multi-generational conflict. It's not something that started necessarily October 7th. This campaign or this battle certainly started October 7th, 2023, when Israeli and American citizens were taken by Hamas. And to say it mildly, very badly mistreated, killed oftentimes. I would suggest that Israel has a moral responsibility, the government of Israel, to ensure the safety and well-being of its citizens. And they are going to have to respond in some way. And for it to be an effective response, they're going to have to go after the nuclear capability, future nuclear capability of Iran. I do think we as a country need to recognize our moral responsibility in both providing funding and, in a sense, a cover for Iran to improve or advance its nuclear capability.
Bill?
Well, from my point of view, it's important that we have had, as John mentioned, a long-standing feud. I'm not sure how the Hatfields and McCoys finally resolved itself in our own culture. How did they finally resolve that situation? Basically, I think they died off, but eventually they were able to sit down together and recognize each other as human beings. I do think we have a history, centuries old history of what was considered the just war theory. And that it is important to know that it's not something that is justified in taking the initiative, but it is a proportionate response, and that you have a right to defend oneself. Self-defense has always been recognized as a way to try to respond when violence is done to someone else or to defend someone who's innocent. But it also needs to be proportional. And that's the hard part, I think, in our modern times, is that minimizing always civilian population risks, but again, we know, and this goes back even further in history, where people sometimes put military encampments around civilians. So, I mean, that's not something new either. But from my point of view, it is important that if we're going to have a war and violence like this, it needs to be proportionate, it needs to be justified, and we need to go through those kind of criteria and not just a gut reaction, but one is planned and strategically placed in a way. But the right to support defense, self-defense, and to support innocent people, that should be a high mark of any nation, and particularly our nation supporting others.
Sally?
As much as I try to learn about this, as confusing as it gets, because it's all intertwined and it goes back for generations. I've been saying to my son, who is military, I want you to draw me a map so I can have a visual of this is going on, what this is going on, and what's going on. And his answer is basically it's Iran, that Iran wants power, and that in any way that we can help support Israel, that's what we need to do. And anything else to say, I'm ready to listen. I want you all to have the solutions, I think.
Well, I just think it is long, as we all know. It's ages past. But there's a recent version to this feud. This Hatfield-McCoy feud is relatively recent compared to the grand scheme of things. You know, at one time, Iran, which was Persia, was regarded as a savior for Israel, biblical Israel. So to show you how things can change over time, you know, Cyrus, of course, was instrumental in them returning back to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. So even Cyrus of ancient Persia was regarded as a savior. So now it's the great Satan. So time has a way of redefining lines, redefining what's moral, what's not moral, what's godly, what's not godly. And then when you have, you know, the generations of occupation by different entities, Europe being England being and Britain being in control of Jerusalem, and the early periods of the 20th century, that added a whole nother mix to it after World War I. So that changed things, of course, and then you had the creation of Israel. This modern day Israel is not the Israel of the Bible. It's a modern day creation, and a man-made creation that was birthed from the UN. So you have this latest iteration of Israel that's a modern man-made version of Israel. So you have all of that in this great cauldron mixed around and stirred around, and you hear words like self-defense, you know, thrown around a lot. You know, this week we recently celebrated the 100th birthday of Jimmy Carter, who I regard as one of the most moral presidents we've ever had. And I've always regarded his regard for what's going on in the Middle East. He's written a couple of books on that subject, one of which is called Peace, Not Apartheid. I know that he referred to what was going on with the Palestinians over as a kind of apartheid for years. Even Desmond Tutu regarded it as apartheid as well. So anything that's short of this bigger two-state solution regarding the Palestinian people as human beings, those innocent people that are being killed there, of course. You hear a lot of voices around the world, even Jewish voices, but you very seldom hear a singular Palestinian voice to speak for them. I don't know who that entity would be. So anything short of balance, anything short of proportionality, anything short of that is going to be retaliation. The one with the biggest gun, the biggest bomb is going to win. We know that that Israel has nuclear capability. Palestine does not. You know, Iran may eventually. So you got a lot of disproportionality going on there, and a lot of innocent lives are being eliminated every day. So and so the 40,000 or so people that are dying those are permanent deaths that are in the ground for on the Palestinian side, and then we have still the hostages, which is around about 2,000-3,000 or so. So it's the whole thing is out of proportion. There's no real moral due north to it all until there's a determination to focus on the higher good, and because clearly it's not going anywhere the way it's going. So that's the fact of the matter. So.
That goes into some of the things I was going to present there, and that's a good assessment there. because when I was doing some research on it, basically in the history of Israel, of course, we know that from the scriptures that they have succeeded in overwhelming odds. But when we look in terms of them being captive in the Assyrian and Babylonian empires, eventually got permission, as you mentioned, to go home by the Persians. But Iran was part of all of those empires. And then we fast forward in time, things seem to be cordial in recent times, like 20th century recent times. After the creation of Israel in 1948, Iran was the second Muslim country to recognize them, behind Turkey. So, and they had close ties with them during the reign of the Shah. That all changed in 1979. Shah was overthrown. Iran cut ties with Israel and took up the Palestinian cause, among other issues. There was small skirmishes here and there. And then the divide got wider and wider as the years passed. We can see that, throughout their history, they've either been dominated by someone, and just now, more recently, and I can maybe say in my lifetime, that they were able to establish a new Israel, but still are having difficulty holding on to it.
And also we're approaching this somewhat as, two nations, but it's also in some ways two religions as well that are coming into play here. And not exclusively just two religions, but predominantly, I would say that too as well, which is another overlay on that and how one interprets one's sacred texts and how you enter into dialogue over that as well. Certainly, international treaties and international policies between two nations, but also how do two very distinct standing faiths also interact together in a peaceful or in an aggressive way. And that's, I think, it's another overlay to what's going on.
Well, I would say, though, and not to disagree with you, but just to add a layer to it, that there are three religions involved,
Yes.
Islam, Judaism, and Christianity.
Yes.
Two of
Yes.
those religions don't call for the annihilation of the other. Now, I'm not saying all of Islam does, but certainly a large portion of a very active interpretation of Islam that has drawn many people to it in that faith calls for the annihilation of at least one, if not both, of those religions or nations that for them represent those religions. So I before we try to equalize moral responsibilities, I want us to realize where the balance tips. We are hearing from the leadership of the Palestinians, Clay. They're the ones deciding to launch the rockets on October 7th. That was Hamas. Hamas were the originally elected leadership of the Palestinian state, man-made, if you will, and then they killed off their opponents. So they are the government of Palestine. And the word they are sending is they want Israel annihilated. Israel, the government of Israel, has, in my view, the moral responsibility, and we have, I would suggest, a moral responsibility to stand with Israel in support of their attempt to remain alive, to keep their people safe and secure.
Well, you mentioned religion. I don't think it's a religious issue, because Israel is not a religious state.
No, I agree. It's a religious issue
Yeah,
on one
so,
side.
So it's not. Now,
That was my
Iran
point.
may be,
Yes.
but Israel is not. So it's just a state that is, I won't call it agnostic, but it is a non-religious state. It's a secular.
It's a
government.
religious nation and a secular government.
Right. So it's not a religious fight on its face. So we may try to import the Christian and religious, issues into it, but this is not a religious issue.
Well, I would suggest it is
Okay, I
on
was gonna
Iran's
say,
side.
Well, and I was,
But it's Israel is not, modern day Israel is not the Israel of the Bible. It's a man-made state that happens to
I
use
agree.
that name.
I agree.
Okay,
It's not a religious issue for
and
Israel, it is for
And
Iran.
unlike the United States, they don't include God in any of their official government documents. So we may even claim in God we trust here on our money, but they don't there. So it's not so much a religious fight at issue, it's just a man-made power fight that has been escalating over the years. As far as a moral obligation, back and forth, the only moral obligation that we should be looking at as Christians is Christ as the moral, compass about what is right and what is wrong. Doing unto others, you haven't done it yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the ethics I think should be the moral guide in every discussion. Regardless of what is at issue, I think, like Jimmy Carter, he has always pointed to that high moral ground. Anything less than that is going to be a continuation of confusion you see that's going on right now.
but you still have religion influencing politics in Israel as well. That there is a religious movement in there to impose Jewish Shabbat practices on everybody. There's a movement to do that. I mean, there's even a movement in our country to say that we're a Christian nation.
But it's not the official.
Correct. I didn't say it
edicts
was,
of
but I
the
said, but
government.
there's a movement going on, and there is within people, just as there's a movement in our country to say this is a Christian nation.
Well, there's a
And-
movement to do Christian nationalism. Right.
Yes, I'm just saying, and so I think there is comparably a Jewish nationalism movement going on there that would totally eliminate people of other religions. There is that movement there. I've encountered it in some conversations over there, particularly those who feel like that the laws are designed in such a way to minimize my ability to practice my faith. And so, so that's it's undercurrent. It's not official any more than it is in our country or otherwise. But I do understand it's official in Iran. It is. It is an Islamic state. But so it's just it's another undercurrent.
So which one of you solved this?
I did.
Oh,
The quickest way to peace is for one side to win. I have no moral ambiguity as to which is the side on right. I'm not so naive as to think both sides or either side is 100% right, but I certainly see the Israeli nation, country, as coming on the side of doing what it is supposed to do as a government. They did not initiate the attacks. They're defending themselves.
Well, 40,000 people, children, dead.
I'm sorry.
40,000 people, children, mostly children, women, children, dead.
Well, when
Okay.
when a government hides its
each of those children are in the image of God, that God is not pleased with innocent children being killed.
so you would just stand
No, I didn't
aside.
say that. I'm
So
just
well,
saying-
what's your
I'm
result?
just saying
What's-
it does not please God to see those innocent children being killed.
I agree. What's your conclusion
Well,
then we should
I
do?
conclude on that. Now, what
So
from
we
there
do
out?
nothing.
I didn't say that.
So what do we
But
do?
I'm saying you recognize that innocent children are being killed and they
I
should not be
recognize
killed.
it.
And that needs to stop.
I think you
The
could-
best way to stop it
That
is
needs
for
to stop.
Israel to win.
I want to go back to the Abraham story, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Ishmael, because somehow it seems to start there, and then it just mushrooms. But apparently, when you go there, God had compassion on Hagar and Ishmael when she went out into the forest or into the woods or wherever she went, and she thought that her child was going to die, and God had compassion on her. And on, this conflict keeps going, and it keeps going, and our country only has a few hundred years.
Well, this is a relatively modern iteration over there. I mean, this really started like in after World War I.
I disagree.
It's a
I think
modern
it goes,
iteration
I think it can go back
of
further.
it. It can go back, but this version is a relatively modern iteration.
And if you want to get passionate about something, you get passionate about your religion. But you also get very passionate about power. So I think somehow it's between the two.
Yeah, I think power trumps religion every time.
And what's your
I
profession?
think it trumps, power trumps it every time. It wins every time.
You're
Talking about
very
winning,
cynical.
It's always the power is the winning. We talk about winning,
I want the guy in the middle of the conflict.
biggest gun, biggest bomb,
Answer the
biggest
question.
gun, biggest bomb wins.
It's the quickest way to stop the war.
Ceasefire would help.
No, you don't.
Yeah, but it's
Ceasefire
not.
would help.
It,
Is that
it,
gonna
it
happen?
requires two sides to have a ceasefire.
You know, I was involved in a war that was ended with peace talks, but the peace talks took 10 weeks to determine what kind of table they were going to use.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, and I'm already several years beyond, you know, my tour, and you wonder, you know, what's going to be the answer? Ceasefire is certainly going to be the answer. Stop the hostilities, get to the table and talk about
And
it.
get back to Jimmy Carter. He did negotiate a monumental truce between Israel and Egypt
At Camp David.
at Camp David. So I think that's a good model, and with the heart and the aspiration to pursue it with that spirit. And again, I you know, defer to his approach and his method.
Yeah, that
And
was
his-
an
his
agreement
ideal.
between Egypt and Israel,
What was that model
and that
called?
is held.
Yes.
What was that model called?
Well, I mean, it's just general
The Camp
compassion.
David
Camp
Accords.
Accord,
yeah,
Accord.
Yeah.
Camp David Accords, yeah.
And Egypt has at least maintained a hands-off approach to Israel.
Right. But he was able to get the two sides together in the same room. I mean, at Camp David, I mean, it wasn't in the Middle East that they got together. They got together on seemingly neutral territory that he was able to then facilitate that, yes.
Maybe the term Middle East is a European term.
Correct, yes.
The people that live that don't refer to it as Middle East.
What do you use?
It was called Middle East because someone flying from Britain was on his way to Japan and stopped in the middle
Yeah.
and said, this is the middle place to the east,
Like Midway, Kentucky.
like Midway, Kentucky.
What term do you use?
I'm just making an explanation
Okay.
about that term.
You don't come down too hard on any position, do you?
I would just explain that there's always an outside somebody that's importing their values and their definitions to the whole situation.
We have about a minute left. Rarely does a show just consume one topic, but this one did, and it's a complex, you know, I don't know. Our prayers certainly go out to everyone
Yeah.
Absolutely.
in the area, and for
And the resolution is
Resolution.
probably beyond our thoughts.
it's certainly.
And this is a great debate. We're going to talk about the debate. We kind of consumed the show with some.
Well, and that's certainly one of the
Great
topics in
debate
the
here.
debate too. So, but thanks to our guest today, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, Richard Uhler, retired U.S. Army chaplain, Dr. John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist Church, Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary, and St. William Catholic Churches. Thanks for a great discussion. Have a great week. We'll see you again next week.